Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to move on now, actually, and we're going to look at the next big policy move, certainly in the NHS, around anchor institutions. So if the gremlins are behaving themselves, when I click this, we should have a really short video to watch.
So what are anchor institutions? In the United States context, they're overwhelmingly nonprofit or public institutions. What defines an anchor institution is they're the kinds of organizations that are rooted in place, unlike for-profit corporations, which move all over the world and change their locations. Universities and hospitals, at least in the North American context, tend to stay where they're founded, and that's why they're called anchors.
The sounds come off, Jill.
Focus to benefit the local community through localized purchasing, hiring, investment, that hospitals as anchor institutions can really have a transformative effect on the lives of people and the health of the community, and in particular, those who are in a more low income or poverty situation. So at Johns Hopkins, which is a very big health system in Baltimore, they created something called Hopkins Local, build, hire, buy locally. They've made a commitment to increase the number of city residents employed at Johns Hopkins. So far, they've hired 304 new people from specific zip codes. You need to say these are the neighborhoods we're going to hire from. They use certain strategies. They identified positions in their workforce that were particularly available to people who may not have graduated from high school. So my question back to you would be, what is going on in the UK that might provide the kind of incentive for directors of hospitals to start to move in a more demonstrably community benefiting direction?
So, Chris, really, would you just give us an overview, having watched that video, a really brief overview about what makes the NHS an anchor institution? What's it all about?
Cool. So, in terms of anchor institutions, the way I sort of think about it is they're large, generally public sector organisations. They often have some form of sort of public good in their sort of in their goals or objectives. But they can also have a massive impact on our communities just through how they go about their business. So, for instance, Lewisham and Greenwich Trust, our primary goals are around sort of delivering care to patients and serving our communities, but we can have a massive impact on our community with how we engage with them and how we work with them, which is sort of separate to the core goal and mission. It's how we can leverage that opportunity to support our communities in a better way, in a more complete way.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Chris. And in terms of the anchor strategy, some of the benefits that the marketplace would see and why it's important for us to talk about it today, and especially around the NHS in your area, what does it mean from an anchor strategy perspective that geographical areas will start to work together more? Is that what the marketplace can expect to see and feel?
So in terms of what it means, I think from a procurement perspective, it means we need to think more about how we buy and how we can engage with our local economy and that sort of thing. In terms of your question around sort of collaboration, or whether that's only going to be a geographical, that's quite a difficult one. I don't think it will be solely geographical. I think, like with a lot of things in life, there's not a one size sort of fits all response. There could be some instances where we look to collaborate based on sector or type of requirement, and there'll be the other areas where we look at doing it geographically. I think what we've got to be quite careful of is sometimes when you collaborate, it can drive up the size of contracts, which can be a good thing, but it can sometimes therefore exclude smaller bidders and or make it a bit more challenging or a bit more complicated to bid for, which sort of goes against some of the goals of the anchor strategy. So I'll take us as an example. So we operate in a collaborative shared service across 4 NHS trusts. So sometimes that means we'll procure things together as a 4 or 2, 3, or 4 of us, where we need to leverage that demand to get sort of the best value we can. But there'll be some things that we need to buy that actually are quite location specific, or maybe they're specific to a single organisation because we're all subtly different from each other. But I mean, actually, the best thing we can do for our organisation is buy that as an individual rather than lumping it with something that doesn't quite fit with just for the sake of lumping it together. And there'll be some things where we might feel actually from a geographical perspective, maybe it's beneficial for us to work with the council or with Lewisham College or another sort of anchor institution or like more local to our sort of geography here. So there isn't a one size fits all, but what we are trying to do across different areas is come up with something like a similar approach. So if we're all looking at social value, we're all looking at opening up opportunities to bidders and advertising what we're looking to buy in the future. That will help us find opportunities to collaborate together in the future, but also try to make that sort of bidding experience a little bit more seamless for organisations. So maybe they're not having to check 50 different portals, they're checking 2 or 3. For instance, we use the Health Family Force tender portal, so that's all 4 of our trusts, but it's run by the Department of Health, so loads of NHS bodies use it, which is similar to, I know in Yorkshire they use Your Tender, which covers most of the councils within Yorkshire. So again, we're cutting down on some of those barriers to accessing opportunities. So yeah, not a one size fits all in terms of geography. I think it'll be very much what the best way to deliver that requirement is. Sometimes that's geographically based and sometimes that'll be more sector based.
Brilliant. And I think, I mean, I believe I saw Anchor Strategy in action last Thursday. So you and I were at the Lewisham Deal Partnership Meet the Buyer event, where what you weren't saying was we're going to procure the same things at the same time, but what you were saying as a collective geographically was actually our ambitions are the same. So we're all committed to working with smaller organisations to being accessible to everybody regardless of size, scale, sector, etc. And that I think, I guess, is part of an anchor strategy coming to life so that businesses can come and meet the buyer, but from all of the anchor institutions in a particular area, which is great for a small business who then doesn't have to have 4 conversations. They can have 4 conversations, but in that one session, as opposed to trying to do that 4 times separately, which is great. Go on, sorry, Chris.
The Lewisham Deal was a really good example of an opportunity. So we had the council there, they did a lot of the organising of it, the trust, we had a couple of housing associations, we were hosted by Goldsmith University and Lewisham College were there. And actually, when you look around the room, that was most of the big sort of public sector buyers in the borough of Lewisham were all there in one place, sort of giving a very similar message and listening to some of our local suppliers around some of the challenges that they face or some of the barriers they come across and really gave us food for thought of how we can do things a little bit better or break down some of those barriers. And I found it personally really rewarding and I think we're early in this journey of anchor strategy and I think it's only going to go on to be bigger and better from here.
Yeah. No, for me as a small business, it was great actually to hear the consistency in messaging from each of those organisations. One last question from me that around policy and anchor strategy. So some providers that we talk to will probably only ever access the NHS or wider public sector via supply chain. So working actually not directly for you as a contracting authority, but working for a principal contractor. Are you doing things to make sure that where the policy ask is the same, that those values and ambitions are reflected through those principal contractors?
Yeah, is the short answer, but the slightly longer answer is that's a really key part of how we're going to deliver against our sort of not only just our anchor strategy, but our generally more green or sustainable strategies across the trusts. Because we know that sometimes the right solution from a contracting point of view is to work with a principal contractor or with a smaller number of organisations. But that doesn't mean that the work stops there, and it doesn't mean that we can't pass on some of that benefit and make sure we're engaging with our local supply chain within that. So I think that the really key thing for us is about how we communicate that with our market, particularly with the principal contractors, to make sure that we are setting this as a requirement, as a ambition, and showing them what good looks like. So I know Lewisham and Greenwich and Guy's and St Thomas, we've got a lot of work planned over the next 6 months with a couple of quite large construction projects coming up around how we can work with these contractors to really embed this approach throughout the supply chain, both from a local economy point of view, but also from a sustainability and a carbon perspective as well. So yeah, it's really key to how we deliver this, and it's again, it falls into that not one size fits all, but how we can maximise delivery across sort of a wide portfolio of delivery models.